So you mentioned you talked to Sam Bankman-Fried about prison. Can you, I don't want to let that go. Let's back up. How do you know Sam Bankman-Fried?
You know, he's a young entrepreneur who romanced the Clintons, romanced the world. He was friends with Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. He was a big donor to Democrats. And he was also a guy at a very young age who had a very big company. And I know what that's like. And when he asked me for advice about this, I said, I think you should learn rap music. I think you should learn slang. I think you should invent a backstory for yourself where you're not Sam Bankman, the businessman, but you were Sam Bankman from Oakland. And
wait, so he asked you your advice on prison?
Something like that, yeah. And one of the questions was, is there internet in prison? I said, no, Sam, there's no internet in prison. They found some irregularities in my old hedge funds. None of my investors ever lost a dime. In fact, they made quite a bit. In fact, one of my investors said he made about 40% a year. Investing in my hedge fund, it was the second best hedge fund he ever invested in his life. And he'd been a hedge fund investor for 20 years, and he invested with Soros and some of the best hedge funds ever. And, I still went through the ringer and...
Wait, I'm kidding. So you were charged with securities fraud?
Yes.
Who did you defraud?
I defrauded the investors that made the 40% a year.
But I'm confused. I mean, how can you defraud someone who makes 30 or 40% a year?
So it's funny, you can be a victim of a crime without necessarily losing anything. And while the government normally never pursues a case like that, they pursue cases where somebody opens their pockets and says, look, I gave this guy $1 million.
Yeah, it's a Ponzi.
The $1 million is gone.
Yeah, right.
And this guy's got a Lamborghini and I have a whole of $1 million. What the hell? And, that's, I think why I was relatively spared on a sentence, even though I thought it was excessive. I feel like, the government normally never brings a case like that. And the Southern District is kind of known as the fraud sort of center. They're pursuing Sam Bankman-Fried at the moment.
Yeah.
They hop on these cases. They love these cases. The Eastern District isn't really, the place to do that. They mostly deal with visa cases, gun cases, drug cases, things like that, mob fraud.
So that's Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, not Manhattan.
Yep, it was Loretta Lynch's division. It's a fairly political division. And, the person that prosecuted me is now a partner at a law firm and making, a lot more money than he made before.
So did you sense from the beginning that your prosecution was political?
Yeah, no, I mean, I know it was. And when you say political, it's not a left or right thing necessarily. It's actually more of a status thing. Every player in this symphony of grift has a different role to play. And, the prosecutor's role is looking out for himself. He's not interested in the community of New York City being, better or worse than it was yesterday. He's a lawyer from a top law school. He's trying to make millions of dollars. And prosecuting Martin Shkreli is a great way to do that. If it happens to make his bosses happy, great. But politics has nothing to do with his decision. And damages are the centerpiece of how you get sentenced. There's actually a rule book, and it's a point system. It's kind of absurd. You get 7 points off the bat for conviction. But 7 points is almost no time in prison, which is great. So I said, all right, give me the 7 points. But then on a sliding scale, there's a dollar amount that gives you more and more points. So Sam Bankman, for example, his fraud amount is $10 billion. They don't have a section for that. It's like, off the charts. Mine was, something like 7 or 8 million. And there is a section for that. And it gets you to about 40 years in prison. And
40 years?
Sure. Sam Bankman's going to prison, most likely, for a long time. Sam's from an upper class, family in California. He's never been around, minorities, let alone, inner city minorities who have a very different way of life. And when he asked me for advice about this, I said, I think you should learn rap music. I think you should learn slang. I think you should invent a backstory for yourself where you're not Sam Bankman, the businessman, but you were Sam Bankman from Oakland. And
wait, so he asked you your advice on prison?
Something like that, yeah. And one of the questions was, is there internet in prison? I said, no, Sam, there's no internet in prison. If you can smuggle a cell phone in through somebody's butt or something, maybe you can, find a way to get, some cell phone reception. But no, there's no internet kiosk where you can go play video games. It's a rough place. And, I think one of the reasons I was successful in prison, I have many friends from there, is that I understand, I grew up in Brooklyn, melting pot, I understand minorities. And we had a lot in common, and commonality is humanity. And, all of the trials and tribulations they would face with their families, I'd face with mine. that commonality existed. No, they didn't go to college most of the time. No, we had different levels of education. But there were a lot of smart people there. There were a lot of, yeah, sure. I mean, the circumstances of that people can fall into making a left turn or a right turn in life, you can make mistakes. And I think that there are a number of people who've been very successful. Michael Milken, obviously people like, Charles Kushner. There are folks who have gone to prison and made a mistake in life. And the young men mostly who get locked up, who are mostly black or Hispanic, it is a sad thing to see. And I don't know what the solution is, but I do see that, a good 10, 20% of them are really good eggs that kind of just, are sorry for what they did. They felt like they had no choice. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. But, there are people that probably do deserve a second chance. And unfortunately, society, every time I read a story about me, it's convicted felon Martin Shkreli.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, why don't you say U.S. patent owner Martin Shkreli? Or billion-dollar, company starter Martin Shkreli? Like, where's that? Why is it convicted felon?
So you mentioned you talked to Sam Bankman-Fried about prison. Can you, I don't want to let that go. Let's back up. How do you know Sam Bankman-Fried?
He's a young entrepreneur who romanced the Clintons, romanced the world. He was friends with Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. He was a big donor to Democrats. And he was also a guy at a very young age who had a very big company. And I know what that's like. And he had a much bigger company, 10 times bigger than mine, but not 1,000 times bigger. We're in the same universe. And, he was just kicking butt. He was on the cover of Forbes and it was all a lie. And he actually didn't succeed at all, which is ironic. But he represented this group called effective altruism, which has sort of took Silicon Valley by storm. And me and a few other people created a counter group called effective accelerationism, where we kind of said, we're the diametrical opposite of you guys, and you guys are going to ruin our country if you keep sort of talking about what you're talking about. And EA, effective altruism, has basically died with Sam. He was laid bare as a fraud, and I think that whole movement has been laid bare as a fraud.
There's no question.
And
it doesn't entail actually helping anyone around you.
No. And
you don't have to tip at dinner or pay your housekeeper a bonus, right?
What's really funny about effective altruism is that it's a movement for people who can afford to be altruistic. Right. It only counts if you're a billionaire.
The most selfish people in the world seem to love it, I have noticed.
Yeah.
But you know him because you disagreed on that?
No, I started to, get to know him when his company was succeeding, and then I really started to get to know him when he got in trouble. And, I think that, it's just a sort of sorry situation. I kind of went through it too, where you just can't believe that this has happened to you, and you're in denial that they're going to win. There's nothing you can do about it. And this is a guy who's gone to every math competition, every MIT, thing, and he's been told he's special his whole life. And he's in this spider's web of the DOJ indictment where it doesn't matter how smart you are. You cannot think your way out of this. You're going to jail. And, the one or two cases where you somehow were acquitted was a huge mistake for the DOJ. And they went back and studied how that won't happen again. It's a system designed to incarcerate you. And he's been defiant. He went on a speaking tour. He went on all this stuff. They had to lock him down to his house on house arrest because he was talking too much. And they finally said, enough, we're tossing it in. And it's hard enough to be indicted. It's harder to fight it from inside a jail cell. It's basically impossible.
But why, I always wonder this, and I've asked friends of mine who are going to prison this question. I never get a good answer. You think you're being unfairly treated? Most people being prosecuted think they're being unfairly treated.
Sure.
Some are, some aren't, but they all think they are. And you think you could spend the rest of your life in prison? He definitely could spend the rest. Why don't you flee?
It's a funny question.
No one flees.
No one flees. There was this guy who fled, and he actually fled successfully, and he came back. My lawyer was his lawyer, and he came back and he said, look, the thing you were charged for isn't illegal anymore. Can my guy come back to the US? And the judge said, absolutely not. If he comes back here, he's got to do another 3 or 4 years. And they made an agreement to do that. But it's hard if you're Sam Bankman with his face to sort of flee and find a place to flee. And they tend to find you. The government of the U.S. stretches to almost every other country in the world. They have agreements to send you back, extradite you. Only 3 countries don't have those agreements. So you better be ready to be Edward Snowden, in essence, if you want to sort of, have a way to flee and survive. And it's just one of these things where as soon as there's a warrant or something like that, they pay pretty close attention to you. Fleeing, is also kind of, I think to a lot of folks, a bit of a cowardly kind of way out. I think that arrogance that comes with, success in life bleeds over to the system where, I can beat this. I can find a way to get out of this. And there's no way out of it. And I think he's learning that the hard way right now.
So just to wrap up on this, you think there is no way out of it for Sam Bankman-Fried?
There's no way out of it for anyone. It's the justice system is a joke. It's a performative act. It is no different from a show trial in communist China. Find me one case where somebody's been acquitted at federal court. It is the outlier of outliers. There's thousands of these indictments every year, tens of thousands, and there's no acquittals. You might get acquitted on a charge, as I did, or many of them, but they throw enough spaghetti at the
Why does nobody say this?
It's,
there are very few trials, as you point out. Most people just plead out. But when there is a trial, the media acts as if it's like a cliffhanger.
It's really funny because it's a foregone conclusion, and I think that there's a mix of things that make these trials unfair. One of them is this putative burden on the government, which doesn't exist. So they get to go first. And if you know anything about like behavioral economics or Daniel Kahneman, if you have to sit through 5 weeks of why this guy's a bad guy, and after 5 weeks he gets to speak his piece, it's really unfair because the anchoring principle of I've just heard this guy being bad.
When did you stop beating your wife?
Yeah. It's just
they've already framed it.
It's a framing problem, and it's just impossible to beat that. One of Sam's jurors was sleeping, which is the death knell. If a juror starts to go to sleep, he's made up his mind, you're going to jail. And it's so hard to beat the government at trial that it's virtually impossible. Again, you have better odds in other countries, which you wouldn't expect. So I think Sam's he's in it pretty deep, and it's a lot of people think he should go to jail for life or something like that. And I think he's not maybe as culpable as some people think, but he's certainly culpable. And I think there's a fair sentence for him. I can't say exactly what it is, but he's going to get something.
You often hear people say the news is full of lies.
In Kennedy's motorcade,
239 people. The death of Jeffrey Epstein.